Welcome back to our watercolour flower series. Today we're going to be looking at this Mechanopsis Himalayan blue poppy, and I've sketched out the flower already. Actually, it was an image that I got from a seed catalogue online, and they of course have got lovely pictures of flowers that you can grow from the seeds that they sell. So they want you to look at these wonderful specimens that they've got. So that's a good idea to get some nice flowers from. First thing that I'm doing is I'm masking in the myriad of, I think they're called stamens, in the centre of the flower. And I'm doing this with a blue masking fluid which comes in a pen form. It's a company called Molotow, and they have pens in 3 different sizes. This one's the medium one. And I'm just making sure that I'm leaving some space because it's not a solid clump, and round the edges they're individual, so you can see the roundness of the shape. So I just pop that in, and it needs to dry thoroughly before you can move on to anything else. You don't want to be disturbing that before it's dry. It doesn't take very long, about 10 minutes, and you're good to go. So don't do any of the petals that butt up to that at the moment. But we can do the stem and the little buds that it's got, because they aren't touching the masking fluid at all. So first thing to do with the stem is just glaze it with clear water right over the entire stem, and this will give your paint somewhere to flow into. And mix yourself up some green. I used olive green, a mixture of olive green and a little bit of Windsor blue green shade and some lemon yellow. And I'm just painting it down the left hand side of the stem, and then going alongside that with some water just to pull the paint out. And I'm doing the same thing now with this. I haven't waited for the stem to dry, which was a bit foolish, and now it wants to run into the stem, of course, because it's wet. So just be careful and try not to do that. It's better if you don't do it at all. But I just mopped up my additional paint there with a dry brush. So same thing, put your darker colour on, and then just a sweep of water above that, just to spread it out into the stem. So same here, put your water on, give it a nice track to flow along. Pick your paint up, put it on the left hand side. Quite close to the line that you've penciled in, and then some water on your brush and just spread that paint out. Fill in the stem. Just be careful. So the next thing to do are the buds. And same thing, glaze over the entire area with clean water. Make sure you've got enough water down for the paint to spread into, and don't go outside your lines, otherwise the paint will go there. So we're putting the paint on the right hand side. You have to work out yourself where your light's coming from, and then just pull that paint out. And I want a little bit of light in the centre there, so I was careful not to put too much paint on it. Same process, light down there, paint down there, and then pull it out with clear water. And I'm just lifting out a bit of light there with a clean, damp brush. So now it's time to start on the flower itself, mixing up some blue. I'm not sure that the blue I settled on was the correct blue. I used French ultramarine and a little bit of Windsor blue. I think You might be more accurate to the flower itself if you use cerulean blue, actually. But this is what I used anyway, the French ultramarine. Yeah, looking at it, and I can see that there's drops of pollen coming down onto the gravity is forcing it straight down. So it's a good idea to drop that in towards your stem, giving the idea that gravity's had a hand in this. It's not just willy-nilly. So you need to leave that to dry, so don't do that petal first. Select yourself another petal to start on. Maybe start on a smaller petal, just till you get your confidence. So, same thing, put your glazing water on, clean, clear water. Quite a bit of it, perhaps more of it than you'd think actually. Got a hair in mine there. And sweep it up into the masking fluid, into the stamens, because there is blue behind those stamens. So now's the time to get that in. So there's your water down. And as I said, possibly more than you'd think you'd need actually. And start off with dropping the blue in there. Your picture is your best friend. It's got all the answers of where the dark shades are and where it's lighter, where you need to hook some light out. So I'm basically putting a wash over that petal, over pretty much all of it. And then it's time to look at the picture and work out where the darker shades need to be. Whether the petals have got edges on, because sometimes you can't see the edge. So I've got a clean damp brush now, and I'm just hooking that colour out, give me some light, and along there, which is a very light bit. So that's fine, I'm quite pleased with that for the first sort of pass. Don't do the petal next door to it, because you'll have problems like we had earlier, where your paint will run into the damp part, and then you won't be able to differentiate between your petals. So don't forget to go up into your stamens as well with your blue paint. Observe your picture all the time and see where you need the lightest colours and where you need the darkest colours. And while it's at this stage, it's a good time to hook out that colour, and do that by having a clean, damp brush, as dry as you can make it whilst it's still damp, and hook out the colour. So now that first petal's dry, we can move on to doing the one next to it. And I'm just glazing over again, same thing. Don't forget to go up into your stamens, like that, get some nice colour in there. Follow your picture, always follow your picture. And once again, I'm hooking out these highlights that I want. That's a very solid line there, but I don't want it to look like it's a hard edge. So I'm just taking some water and going over that line just to let the blue flow, so it's not a really hard edge. And we're coming along. I mean, it's not difficult. It's really, really not. It seems difficult and it looks difficult, but really when you get stuck into it, it's not that difficult at all. So we're glazing this smaller petal up into the stamens with the blue, following the picture that we've got. See where we need dark, see where it needs to be not so dark. Dropping the dark in first, then just spreading that out and hooking out some highlights like we've done before. Hooked out a bit too much there actually. So I'm just spreading out the paint that I've got already existing on that petal, putting in a nice dark line. Just thinning out that line, it's just too thick. So I'm just taking my damp brush and just running it alongside the line to get some of the thickness out of it. And this is quite a large petal actually. So make sure you've got plenty of water on, because if you haven't, by the time you've done one side, the other side will be dry. So make sure you've got sufficient water on. I'm just putting the really dark bits on first. Just map those out so you know where you're going really. Try not to disturb them then when we brush around them. So when you get it to that stage, have a good look at your picture and make sure that you know that it's what it's supposed to look like. Hook out any highlights that you might want. And I mean, we're really making progress at this stage. It's coming along nicely. So the adjacent petal's dry, so we can do this one. And I've obviously decided to be brave and go right along and do that whole big section there. So plenty of water on your paper or you'll run out by the time you get to the... I'm just checking that the glaze is okay, that I haven't missed anywhere. Sometimes in different lights it's hard to see where your glaze is. So in with the blue. Checking all the time. Always checking on your picture. See where you need more paint, less pigment, more pigment. And at this stage you can drop in lines and it's so wet that it will wick them away, so you won't be left with solid lines. And that's a dark bit, but we don't try not to get hard edges on your paint, on your painting, because they don't look very good. So there we are with the petals done. Now I'm left with this very solid line down here, and it doesn't look right and it shouldn't be there. So what I'm doing is I'm using a little solid brush. If you've got an old brush that's sort of, the bristles are stuck together, or an old cheap brush that's very solid, then just agitate the bits that you don't want with water on your brush, and then dip it off with a kitchen towel, and you can rectify loads of mistakes that way. So, you know, never feel that your mistake's there for all permanency. You can always do something with it. So that looks better with those solid lines gone. They really didn't look right. Right, now I'm really looking at my picture now, seeing where I need details in, darker parts. And I'm just following along really with what it's telling me. And I'm using a very thin brush here. I can't actually see, but I suspect I was using my rigger brush. I'm a great fan of my rigger brush. I like it a lot, and especially for details and fine lines, which is what it's intended for. If you can't quite get on with your rigger brush, well, practice with it. That's the only way you'll get better. But use another brush, but make sure that you get a fine point on it. All your watercolour rounds will have actually that's not a rigger brush I'm using. I think it might be a number 2 round. But I've rolled it into a really nice point. As you can see, I'm getting nice fine lines there. And I'm being dictated to by the picture. Picture's telling me where I need to go. And once I put a line on, I just go back over it, back over the edge with clear water, just to wick it away a bit so we don't get any of those dreaded hard edges. This needs building up a little bit more pigment in it. You're much better to do that, put a little bit of pigment in, see if it's enough, because it'll dry back. It'll dry lighter. So once it's dry, you'll be able to see then if you need to add more pigment to it or if you're happy with it the way it is. So I'm turning my picture around as I go around, so I'm making sure that I'm following what needs to be where it is. This is just the back, the petals folded over, and that's the back, and it's quite dark. The back of it's quite dark there. So I can't give you any more advice really than follow your picture and put the details in gently, so if you're not happy with them you can take them straight out again. If you are happy with them and you need more pigment, then build it up a bit more. So I'm just hooking out a bit of highlights there. Just checking to see it looks okay. And I just want the folded over bit to be darker. So I've gone back in and put a little bit more pigment in because it had dried a little bit lighter than I wanted it to. Just running some water down the side of that dark part that I've just put in, just so I don't get a hard edge. And you can see from the very first coat that we put on, it's given us a good clue where the darker parts need to be. So it's good if in your very first glaze that you put on, if you can give yourself some help by just making the darker spots a bit darker, and then when you come back in to put the details in, you kind of know where they're going to go anyway. Sometimes you've just got to be bold, and it feels a bit scary. It really does feel a bit scary. But if you really don't like it, just put some water on it and dab it out with kitchen towel. There's never anything that you can do that can't be undone, really. So you can see we're progressing around this flower, and it's beginning to look quite nice. So I'm leaving just the edge of that's white. I might come back later and put a light blue on it, but at the moment I'm leaving it really white so it looks like the edge. put the pigment in at the bottom there, and then I cleaned my brush. So really it's just water that I'm using to pull the pigment up, because it's really quite light there. I'll just hook some highlights out. You will find it easier if you follow your picture. I mean, sometimes you might think, oh, that's not on the picture, but I'll put it in. I wouldn't advise that. Nature kind of always knows best, really. So try and follow what you can see. Anytime that you put a lot of pigment on like that, make sure that you wick it out at the sides. You don't want to be left with a dark, hard edge. It really does look horrible. And check the edge of the flower of the picture, because it's not just as easy as getting some blue on your brush and painting all the way around it, because some parts don't actually have an outline. They're so bright that you can't see the outline. So don't just paint an outline around the whole thing. Just trying to soften that out a bit. This petal's also got an edge to it, so I'm trying to leave a little white gap between this petal and the previous one. Painting right over where your little bits of masking fluid are for the dropped pollen. Just pretend they aren't there. Then it's just this last little bit, really. And be brave, put your pigment on. I think maybe one of the most common mistakes people make is being so tentative that they don't actually put enough paint on, and then you can't get the desired look that you want because you've just got no paint on your brush. So in order to paint, that's the first thing you need to do. Get some paint on your brush. So that's certainly the first part of the details, but actually I don't think it looks too bad, really. Yeah, I'm just coming in on those white lines and putting some light blue over them because they're just a bit too stark. and little bits that you can see that you might have missed, just tiny little details that's just going to add to the overall look of it. Because by now, it's pretty much dry, so you can see how it's going to look when it's dry. So some bits will need strengthening up. This petal looks like it's twisted back, that we're not seeing the whole petal. I'm just going over that white edge there. It's just a bit too stark. I was putting very, very, very light blue, but it's better in light blue than the paper white that we had. And there as well. So it's looking pretty good. Well done if you've got it this far. I'm literally just going around staring at the picture, staring at my painting and seeing what needs strengthening up really. I'm just having a good look, see what else needs to be done before we call it done. Just these fine lines that come in from the edge in places. It's amazing how the details really bring it to life. After you've got the first wash on, you think, oh, that's it. Just call it quits at that. But, these details, strengthening and whatever, adding little lines and definitions, they make a huge difference. Well worth doing. I know they're time consuming, but what else would you be doing? What else could you possibly be doing that would be better than this? Nothing. There isn't anything better than this. You can really lose yourself in these details. I mean, try not to get involved in a serious sort of talk at the same time, because you really need a lot of concentration to do this. I tend to listen to music or banal television programs while I'm painting, and it just sort of rumbles on in the background. It doesn't disturb my painting thoughts, but I just can't do it in silence somehow. I don't know. I like something else being there to distract me. Okay, well, I'm thinking that looks good. I think we've done a good job on that. So, just back into the stem. Let's just strengthen that bit up where it comes up into the flower. It's a darker colour and it's in shadow. So I haven't put a glaze on. I'm just putting the paint onto the dry paper. Just strengthening that sort of neck up a bit. So if you had any problems before getting your paint nice and smooth and flat, you can resolve it now. And what I'm doing now is I'm just taking a brush and running it down the centre of the stem that we've just painted, just to give it a highlight so it looks more rounded. And yeah, you know, I know it's pedantic. I'm pedantic. But, you know, I want you to get the very best results you can get. So I'm doing the same with these smaller stems, strengthening the pigment up first of all, putting my pigment down, clean brush to sweep it to the other side, and then a dry, thin brush right through the centre of it to give it that rounded appearance. There we are, you can see the paint coming up and it's looking nicer. I do think, however, that the buds are too small for the flower. There is no way that a flower that size came from these buds. So if you want to make them larger, I think that would be a good idea. I think I've made mine way too small. So I'm just going to add a little bit more pigment to the shadow area and just dot it out with a dry brush. Put your pigment on and then just pounce it from that pigment that you've put on over into the highlight side. So still leave your highlight, that's essential. Strengthening that up again, and down there. Yeah, definitely make your buds larger than that because they just look ridiculous. I don't know what I was thinking, really. Right. It's funny when you step back from things and you look at them again, you can see things that you just didn't see before. So sometimes at this stage I just take it and I put it on the mantelpiece and I sit down and I look at it, make sure that it is what I want it to be. If not, you can rectify things at this stage. If it is, that's great, you know, well done. So now I'm just rubbing off the masking fluid. I'm just doing it with my fingertips. It comes away very easily. Leaving lovely bright white paper that we've preserved for our yellow stamens. There we are, lovely. I'm just taking a rubber to it actually just to make sure that I've got all the little bits out. That's it. Lovely white paper. So we can start on our yellow stamens. Sorry, I've got a really croaky voice today. So I'm using transparent orange and lemon yellow, and I'm just mixing the two together in a pretty uneven mix. I want some parts to be more orange and some parts to be more yellow, but I am paying real attention to not go over the edges because it's just going to look messy and sloppy if we do. So I'm really just painting the white paper. And I'm mixing up the colours, some orange here, some yellow there, so it looks like some are in shade and some are in full light, which would be the case. Oh, switch the light on. It was getting a bit dark. This is winter time here, and it was about sort of 3:30, and the light was just going on me. But I was quite determined to get this finished. So sorry the lighting's not really good on this. You can see what I'm doing. I'm paying real care not to go over that white paper into the blue, because it'll just look muddy, mucky, untidy, and not what we're after. We've taken real good care to get it to this stage. So just be patient. Take your time and get these filled in nicely. As I say, I'm swapping between transparent orange and lemon yellow and a mix of the two. So just to give me some variation. Otherwise, if they were all just the same colour, it would look very staged and unreal. Not realistic at all. This does take time. It is fiddly. Try and go around the little blue bits that you've managed to get in there as well. I really enjoy doing things like this, but I appreciate that it's not everybody's cup of tea. So just painting in those little bits of fallen pollen. And here, more than anywhere, make sure that you don't go over the edges, because it'll look awful. So I'm using a really fine brush here. I think it's a number 1. Just to help, and it's really rolled to a point. It's quite a new brush, so it's got a good point on it. So I'm mixing the colours as I go, some on the palette, some on the paper, just to give me a variation of the yellows and oranges. So it really kind of is dot, dot, dot. This is the last bit, and you'll see when you've finished, it's really worth the effort. Actually, when I'd finished doing this, I put a little Prussian blue shadow under the stamens at the bottom, but for some reason I haven't managed to record that. But here's the finished flower. I hope you like it.